Wow, the door. The gift that keeps on giving. That is, if gifts are problems and just keep giving you more problems. So some general notes on the door. It's an outswing, so the hinges are on the outside. The hinges are called security hinges, and the pins can't just be popped out, so I'm not worried about someone breaking in by removing the door. It's a fiberglass door and it doesn't have a brick mold. We didn't even know what a brick mold was when we bought it, but it's basically the equivalent of a flange on a window. The door is installed about 16 inches above the subfloor because the kitchen floor is raised with storage underneath. I framed out a mostly temporary raised floor just for the purpose of installing the door. Okay, so the first step was trimming the house wrap, taping it up, and applying blue skin to the bottom. We basically just did the same thing we did for the windows, which is the previous video in this series if you missed that. The door came with instructions and we did our best to follow them. It said not to open the door until it was hung, so we left the door unpainted and didn't even open it up to inspect it. We test fit it and it looked like we framed the opening a little wide. It wasn't a big deal, but it meant using extra shims. After the test fit, we went and bought the shower and moved it into the house just in case it wouldn't fit once the door was installed. I'm pretty sure it would have fit, but the paranoia was as strong as ever. We also bought the door hardware while we were there, so we could lock up the house afterwards. So, as per the instructions, we started by caulking the bottom of the door. The caulk made it slippery, not as slippery as Jackie was freaking out about it being, but it was still a little slippery.
I'm gonna get the ladder so I can grab it as it comes flying towards me.
We already did this and it didn't come flying out, did it?
It
is perfectly
It is slippery, so it might just kick out. I don't know.
You ready?
I guess. I don't really know how I can be ready for this. Oh boy. I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared. Okay, I'm scared.
With the door up, we began the long and annoying process of positioning it. The instructions specified an order in which you installed the shims and where, so we followed them and just kept tweaking until the door operated nicely.
Yeah, you're just lifting the door.
Okay, then that's all I gotta do. I gotta shim the shit out of this side. We needed shims installed from both the inside and the outside of the house, because if they were all going the same way, the door seemed to just be able to slip forward. The instructions specified where to install the screws as well. After every screw, we kept checking to see how the door was hanging. The last thing we wanted was a door that didn't close properly. There isn't a lot more to mention about this process, it was just really annoying and it took a lot of shim tweaking to get things right. With the screws all installed and the door opening and closing nicely, I broke off the shims so they weren't sticking out everywhere. Just squirt it in there, break off, no problem.
Like these down here? Yeah, they're 1/4 inch thick.
I feel like the inch that you're supposed to have, so it's a 1/2 inch on either side, it's just wrong. Like, why in the would you want an inch? Like, look at what you have to fill. First of all, we gotta use 2 shims.
I think it's so that if it's extremely warped in one area, you have the space to move it. That's all. Because the gap is ridiculous for sure.
I'm done wasting my time with that. The outside ones are more important. Since we hadn't opened the door at all before getting it hung, we didn't know how much bare wood there was actually on this thing. We got to work painting all the exposed wood we could find. The bottom of the door had these huge gaps in it, so we filled them with caulk and painted it. It was a quick and ugly job, and we just can't figure out why doors come like this. We were really unimpressed. So we don't need anything from in here, I guess? We're just going there and saying, hey, what the f***? Once the paint was dry enough, we installed the door hardware.
Very exciting. Okay, let's move on.
It was going fine until, yeah, it didn't line up. So we had to chisel that out. It was a little ugly, but it works. The door was going to get fully and properly painted eventually, and would be covered with the tarp until then, so I didn't bother being too professional with the paint. Door hardware is pretty straightforward to install. Just read the instructions and plug things in where they fit. We tested it all pretty extensively. It was pretty satisfying to be able to use the door, but this was nowhere close to the end of making it work properly.
Can't go in.
Before we could install blue skin around the door, the shims needed to be broken off, which was harder than it should have been. I didn't take any footage of actually applying the blue skin around the door, but you can see it here. It was the same principle as the windows. The blue skin covers the jamb as much as possible and ends up underneath the trim that goes around the door. Time traveling! It wasn't until most of the siding was done that we finally got around to painting the door. We thought it would be easy to just pop the pins out of the hinges and remove the door for painting. It wasn't. The security hinges mean business and we couldn't figure out how to remove the pins, even after taking out the little screws that seemed to hold them in. So we ended up just unscrewing the hinges from the door itself. Painting the door had to be done in stages so that the brush strokes would end up being pleasing to look at. This was in the directions for the door as well. They said to paint using thin coats, so it took 3 coats to get it done. Only the front of the door has been painted so far because I'll probably want a different color on the inside. Hanging the door back up was incredibly difficult, mostly because it was super awkward to hold. In hindsight, building some proper steps and a little deck for outside the door would have been a great idea. Once the hardware was back on the door, this should have been the end of it, but no, the door had other plans. Remember how exposed the bottom of the door was? Yep, that expanded as soon as the house was allowed to live free from the tarp. The door began rubbing on the bottom plate, or threshold, or whatever it's called. It wasn't good. So the paint started to flake off, exposing the bare particle board once again. This is what accelerated the plans for an awning in an attempt to keep the water off the door. I wanted to make the door operate smoothly again, so I shaved it down slightly using a plane. It didn't take much to make it good again, but I'll have to repaint it at some point, likely next summer. Until then, I figured some contractor's tape will keep any more water off it. Keeping water off it is now my biggest concern. What made the biggest difference seemed to be installing this door sweep. It keeps water that runs down the door from collecting on the bottom. Water was still getting in from the gaps on the sides though, so I needed to do something about it. I found some weather stripping that I hoped would work, but it's a bit too thick and the door now doesn't close very nicely because of it. Still, I'd rather have the door operating poorly but protected. I'll have to find another solution, but this is working for now. I'll probably end up putting out another short video to show the finished result of the door once it's working flawlessly. What this experience has taught me is that there is a reason people use in-swing doors, and why most doors have a covered area outside of them.
Thanks for watching. It really helps me out if you hit that thumbs up if you like this video, and click on the Rookie Roost logo to subscribe to the channel. If you click on that little bell icon, you can get an email notification when new videos go live. You can also follow the daily progress of the build on social media and over at the Rookie Roost website. Check the description below for the links.